What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Total Takedown. This for UFC London. We're talking overs, we're talking unders. How quickly are these fights going to finish? Let's go back through the card on this one. I got to be a little quick today. We're on a bit of a time crunch, so forgive me for this one. We're talking 2.5. Nicholas Dalby taking on Claudio Silva. Over is -135. Under is +115. This is a fight where the only side I really see finishing is Claudio Silva. Nicholas Dalby, karate striker. Yes, he's explosive. Yes, he hits hard. Claudio Silva's a tough dude. He's hard to really get out of there, even though he slows down and gasses. Dalby, on the other hand, has been clubbed and subbed before. We know Claudio Silva's more than capable of that. So I would be looking at the over 2.5. Based on these guys' durability, if you want this one to finish, Claudio Silva is probably the only guy doing it unless Dalby comes out and catches him with something big early. Second fight of the night, Victoria Leonardo taking on Mandy Bohm. Total against that at 2.5. Women's MMA over is -220. Under is +190. I would not be surprised to see an under here, folks. But again, I kind of only feel like it's coming from one side. Everybody knows I am big on Victoria Leonardo this week. I don't like the way Mandy Bohm fights. She's tall, she's long, she's rangy, she's slow, and she's defensively void on the ground. I think Victoria Leonardo can have a heyday taking her down and pounding her out. She'll also be more aggressive in the pocket, faster hands. She'll be able to connect quicker. I like Victoria Leonardo a lot, and I'm not ruling out a finish. But I think it's going to be a late finish when Mandy Bohm slows down. She's known to gas out and get tired. I think round 3 is where this thing is really live. But I do think from a total perspective, you got to lean over. I just don't really want that -220 price tag. It's low-level women's MMA. The armbar from guard is always possible. So I'm not going to count out either of these girls slipping on a banana peel and finding a way to get a finish. Next up, Kyle Nelson taking on Jai Herbert. Total set at 1.5 for this one. The under is -115. The over is -105. So slight movement here towards the under, and I totally think that makes sense. I think violence is the answer in this fight from a general perspective. You know, Lang doesn't go the distance, is like -250, -300, something like that. Kyle Nelson coming up to 155. He's put on a ton of muscle. That's going to do two things. A, he's probably going to be explosive and hit harder, which is a good thing. B, he's probably going to gas out because of all that muscle needing extra oxygen. He's never had a good gas tank to begin with. So I think that really favors this fight going under. Jai Herbert, we know, is a guy that's made out of glass. If he's in the driver's seat of this fight, he almost kicked Ilia Toporia's head off. He absolutely can knock out someone like Kyle Nelson. So if he gets his groove going, he probably finishes. However, that glass chin is something that can always be touched, and Kyle Nelson, especially with all that extra power on him, probably can get to him. I would be looking under, if anything. Charles Johnson taking on Muhammad Mokaev. It looks like my sponsor here, Superbook Sports, they went ahead and took this one down. I forgot to mention at the top of the show. Pub Sports Radio, Superbook Sports, y'all already know that. Let's go. Get with the program. They took this one off the board. I took some over 2.5 at +105 earlier in the week, and I'm curious as to what other books have this lined at. I'm going to shop around here a little live on the show. I wasn't expecting to run into this circumstance here. I know it's probably going to be around the even money. Everyone was expecting this fight to go ahead and go under, but it makes sense to me for it to go over. Yeah, it looks like I am seeing slightly juice to the under 2.5, still mostly market wide, but I think the over makes a ton of sense. People are just severely underestimating Charles Johnson. The guy's never been finished before, and I know Muhammad Mokaev is the guy that is the big hype train on the undercard. Everyone knows how quickly he subbed out his last opponent, and they think he's just going to do it again. Charles Johnson's just flying under the radar. He's a Chris Curtis type. He's a guy that should have been here a long time ago. Very talented, very skilled, and he's going to make a splash once he gets to the UFC. I expect this to be a very competitive striking match, and I've already placed a 2-unit bet over 2.5 +105. You should be able to get even money or like -105 out there on that 2.5 still. I think this one goes all 15 and we see a very close and competitive fight. JSP taking on Makwan Murakami. We've got a total at 1.5 for this one. Over 1.5 is -170. Under 1.5 is +150. And I really think that first round is Makwan's path to victory, right? We know that Jonathan Pierce can get tangled up in some stuff, and Makwan's got a tight squeeze on him. He's got that Darce choke he really likes to go to. He can absolutely finish this thing early. However, Jonathan Pierce, his pace, his pressure, his ground and pound, those are all things that are going to wear on Makwan as this fight goes deeper. I kind of like the over here in this spot. I think Jonathan Pierce is going to do an okay enough job staying safe early and then dragging this fight deep into his waters, maybe get a second or a third round TKO finish, something along those lines. So I'm thinking this fight probably goes over that 1.5, but I can't touch it because of what we saw in Pierce's last fight, the way he got tangled up into pretzels. Makwan will finish those spots. If he lets himself get put in those positions, he's going to be done, and he's going to be done early. So I don't really suggest laying minus 170 on that one, but I will lean to the over for a pick. Charles Rosa taking on Nathaniel Wood coming up next. 2.5 is the total here. Over is minus 205. Under is plus 180. And I think the over makes a ton of sense. These guys are both incredibly durable, tough to finish. Even though I think Nathaniel Wood has the ability to TKO someone like Charles Rosa, he's smaller. He's coming up a weight class, so he's not going to be oversized. And Shane Burgos, an absolute monster at this weight class, is the only one we've seen TKO Charles Rosa. He's too Boston strong is what he is. He's way too durable, tough and rugged to get put out of there, even if he's losing the fight. So I do think we see a 15-minute decision here on this one. I'd be, I guess, a little surprised if Nathaniel Wood was able to go ahead and get the finish, unless it was like a calf kick TKO. Damir Hadžović taking on Marc Diakiese. Total again set at 2.5. Over 2.5 is minus 145. Under 2.5 is plus 125. I actually think Diakiese has some finishing upside here, and believe it or not, so does Damir. Diakiese, though, is a guy that is almost impossible to get out of there. He went 15 minutes with Rafael Fiziev, so I'm really not... Rafael Fiziev. Jeez, always mix those up with the Brazilians. Rafael Fiziev. So that shows how durable and tough he is, right? I don't think Damir is going to be able to put on more of a performance offensively than Rafael was. So I don't necessarily know that outside of a big bomb that just lands perfectly on the button that Damir is going to be able to get Marc out of there. But you never know. This is MMA. Shit happens. Marc, on the other hand, I think he's got a strength advantage. I think he's got a striking advantage. I think he's got a grappling advantage. I could see him finishing Damir, and Damir is a guy we know slows down. He almost got finished in round 3 by Yancy Medeiros. I think Marc is going to pick up where Yancy left off. So I do think that the under has some value here, but it's one-sided, and it's kind of contingent on Damir gassing out in this spot. So I'm going to go with the gut. I'll say under 2.5 plus 125 on this one, but that 2.5 mark is where it gets sketchy. I do think this fight ends in that third round. Ľudovít Klein taking on Mason Jones. Same situation as the last fight. Total set at 2.5. Over is even money, plus 100. The under is minus 120. And Ľudovít Klein is a muscle monster that gasses out late in fights. He's difficult to put away and finish, but he can slow down and be helpless once he runs out of gas. Mason Jones is your typical gas tank monster, stays in your face, forces you to work, forces you to grapple, and then once you slow down, he puts you away. He's coming out to make a statement this fight, filling in on short notice, trying to get in front of a hometown crowd and put on a performance. I do think Mason Jones is more than capable of doing that. Ľudovít Klein always has that left head kick that can come out of nowhere and connect and knock somebody out. So yeah, under 2.5 violence sounds like a fair enough deal on that one to me. Volkan Oezdemir taking on Paul the Bear Jew Craig. Total set at 2.5 on this one. And I got to go violence again. I mean, Volkan, it's set at 2.5 for some reason. Over is plus 180. Under is minus 210. Volkan's got good takedown defense, so if Craig has to stand with him, I don't know that he's going to be able to kickbox with him. I think if Volkan is getting his game off, he probably knocks out Paul Craig relatively easily. Craig, we know, is not a good striker. And if this thing hits the mat, Volkan Oezdemir, he's got great takedown defense, but let's forget about that for a second. If Paul manages to get it on the floor somehow, we know what he does. He just sucks you into an armbar or triangle, and there's no getting away from it once you're down there. So I do think that the under 2.5 here, minus 210 is steep, but damn, I got to go with violence here. Both these guys definitely have that finishing upside, and they both have been known to shit the bed and give up the finish themselves. Hannah Goldy taking on Molly McCann. Total set at 2.5 on this one. Over is minus 260. The under is plus 220. And I actually kind of don't hate the under here. We've seen Hannah Goldy. She's so physical. She's so powerful. If you go to the ground with her, she can snap your arm off like a twig. Molly McCann, she's shown that she's getting better. She's fast. She's explosive. She's able to knock chicks out. And we have seen Hannah Goldy rocked, dropped, and wobbled in several of her previous fights against much lower level of competition. I do think both these girls are actually live for a finish, believe it or not. Molly talked about wanting to fight a little more technical, so that's always a scare because if the fighter wants to take it a little more technical, the game plan is to go longer. Hopefully, if the opportunity presents itself, she gives the finish. And I would look at maybe sprinkling the under 2.5 at plus 220 because that number's plenty juicy. Alexander Gustafsson taking on Nikita. Krylov, total again at 2.5. Over is plus 115. Under is minus 135. Nikita's kind of a killer be killed fighter. Like, he comes out hard. Rarely does he end up actually getting himself into too much trouble, but we've seen him make mistakes, right? Paul Craig tapped him out last time when he was dominating the fight. Looked like he maybe knocked him out, then he gave up the sub. He was fighting Glover to share deep in that third round, put himself in a guillotine, barely got out of that one. It looked like Johnny Walker was going to flatline him and knock him out a couple times, but he fought through it, got the takedown, dragged him to the mat, and drug this thing long. So you could see upside and downside on the total for Nikita Krylov in every single one of his fights. Gus, he's kind of a decisionator, right? Like, unless he absolutely outclasses you, he's more of a 15-minute decision guy. He does have a wicked guillotine on him, though, and Nikita Krylov has been known for sticking his neck in those once he gets tired in the second and the third rounds. Also, Nikita Krylov is a big, slow, lumbering striker, whereas Alexander Gustafsson is a light on his feet, quick counter striker. I actually think Gus has a big upside chance to finish this thing, and Nikita Krylov, you know, if Gus is shot, if Gus really isn't the guy he used to be, then Nikita probably does handle him, and we've seen Gus's back taken, and he's tapped out in a couple of fights very recently. I'll say violence. Let's go under 2.5, minus 135. Jordan Leavitt, Paddy Pimblett, the one everybody's been waiting for. Total on this one is 2.5. Again, the over plus 155, the under minus 175. I'm going to say violence just because I kind of have to here, right? Paddy's got the striking advantage. He's got the athletic and the speed advantage. He hits way harder than Leavitt does. Leavitt is sub or bust when it comes to the finish. There's no striking prowess coming the other way on that. But Paddy is a little bit chinny, and we saw Leavitt KO slam somebody before. The guy's explosive. Like, even though he doesn't have the skill set on the feet, he is still powerful. He is still explosive. So I wouldn't be shocked if either one of these guys gets caught in something. And if they decide to go toe-to-toe in a grappling contest, these guys both know how to scramble and sync something up, so it wouldn't surprise me if one of them made a mistake and got caught. Let's go violence again. Chris Curtis taking on Jack Hermansson, my boy, the action man, back in action here. Total set at 2.5. Pick 'em price tag. Even money, over or under. And I feel like this can look a lot like the Rodolfo Vieira fight, right? Chris Curtis is a much better boxer than Jack Hermansson is, so if he can defend the takedowns like he always has, he can keep this thing standing and then bop up Jack on the feet. Jack's got those nasty low calf kicks, though. He can really chip away at somebody like Curtis from range where he's not quite able to return fire. That could cause a bit of a problem for our guy Chris. And if Jack does happen to get the takedown, obviously he's got the submission upside, so both guys can finish. This is a spot where we've seen Jack Hermansson clipped and hurt on the feet, knocked out a couple times and dropped before. Chris Curtis can finish Jack Hermansson. If this hits the ground, Jack Hermansson can finish Chris Curtis. So I gotta say under 2.5. I gotta say violence. The only problem is that Rodolfo Vieira fight is jumping out in my brain right now, where it kind of feels like there was an example I gave for last week where it was the Air Jordan and Burgos fight where you're like, well, there was absolutely value on the under 2.5. That fight should have been stopped, but it didn't. But it didn't get stopped because that's how those guys fight. That might be this one. This one might be the one where both guys just kind of refuse to fall over. And even though it looks like it should have gone under, it maybe ends up squeezing over. So I'm actually going to say over 2.5 on this one. Chris Curtis by decision, baby. That's the move. Chris Curtis round 3. Tom Aspinall taking on Curtis Blaydes in your main event. And I have to side violence again. This is set at 3.5, not 4.5. 3.5. The under is minus 170. The over is plus 155. The way Tom Aspinall has been fighting, you just have to stick with the violence. He has not gone into the second minute of round 2 in his UFC run. I can't argue with that. Like, even if Curtis Blaydes manages to be the first guy to drag him into the third round, you've still got a full round and a half for him to get a finish there. We don't know what Tom Aspinall's gas tank looks like. In that second round, it did look like he was a little tired against Andrei Arlovski. So if Curtis Blaydes can drag him through that and into the second or the third round, we don't know if he gasses out and just completely dips off a cliff. We don't know if he dumps at that point. So lots of questions here. Questions that I don't really feel like paying my money to answer. But if I had to make a pick, which I do because it's my show, I would say under 3.5, minus 175. We'll just pick violence one more time. This is going to be a fun fight card, everybody. Good luck on all your degenerate action. See you tomorrow for the undefeated post-weigh-in show. Let's roll.